The lake had always been quiet. Its surface remained still even when the wind moved through the trees, as if something beneath resisted the idea of disturbance. The locals called it Lake Merrow, though no one remembered why. The name was older than the town itself, whispered by fishermen and inherited through stories that never stayed consistent. When autumn came, the air around the water thickened with fog. It rolled in before dawn and didn't leave until the sun was nearly gone again, wrapping the shore in a permanent gray haze. The road that led there was long and winding, the kind of path people used once and then avoided forever. On the far edge of the lake stood an old wooden house. It had been built in the 1950s, a summer home for someone long forgotten, now sitting alone among the birch trees. The paint had peeled away, and the boards had swollen with decades of dampness. The dock stretched like a thin finger into the mist, its planks warped and uneven. For years, no one lived there. The windows were covered in grime, and the reflection of the lake in the glass looked almost alive, shimmering faintly even when the air was still. Then, one October evening, the lights came on again. At first, the townsfolk thought someone had bought the place. A distant relative, maybe. But weeks passed, and no one saw anyone arrive. Just a dim yellow light in the upstairs window, glowing through the fog every night. Always the same room. Always the same time. The mail piled up at the roadside box. The grass grew wild again. But the light never went out. Sometimes, fishermen swore they saw movement near the dock at dawn, a figure, pale and motionless, standing at the edge of the water. But when they tried to look closer, the mist thickened, swallowing the shape whole. The stories spread quietly. Kids dared each other to drive down the lake road, to stand by the fence and watch the upper window. Few lasted more than a few minutes before retreating. Some claimed the reflection in the lake didn't match the house at all. One night, a heavy storm rolled across the valley. The rain fell hard, slamming against the roof and drowning the silence. Wind pushed the fog inland, revealing the house for the first time in weeks. Lightning flashed, and for a single second, the water reflected two houses, one real, one faint and upside down in the rippling surface. But the mirrored one flickered. By morning, the storm had passed, and the lake returned to its unnatural calm. Yet something had changed. The trees along the shoreline seemed darker, their trunks warped, their leaves drooping as if weighed down by invisible hands. The air carried a smell, not of rain, but of something older, damp and metallic. That evening, when the light came on again, it was no longer yellow. It glowed faintly blue, pulsing like a heartbeat behind the window. The reflection on the water pulsed with it, perfectly in sync. Then, for the first time in decades, the dock creaked. The planks groaned as though footsteps moved across them, slow, deliberate, steady. The next morning, the lake was lower. Not by much, but enough for the muddy banks to show their scars, deep, narrow impressions that looked like prints, though no human foot had ever been shaped that way. When the wind blew, the reeds whispered as if voices hid within them. Sometimes, if one stood near the dock and listened, a faint knocking could be heard beneath the water, rhythmic and patient. The forest began to change, too. The path that once led to the lake started to shift, turns that didn't exist before, clearings that weren't there a day earlier. Travelers said the road felt longer, stretched somehow. The trees seemed to close in behind them, and when they turned around, the entrance was gone. The house by the lake waited. Its walls no longer looked abandoned. The wood appeared darker, fresher. The front door hung slightly open, and faint trails led from the steps to the water's edge. The reflection of the house shimmered again, though now something else moved within it, faint shapes, pacing behind the glass of the inverted world beneath the surface. When the moon rose high, the lake turned silver, and for the first time, something broke the water's skin. It wasn't a fish, nor a bird's shadow. It was a hand, pale, glistening, and impossibly still. It rested just above the waterline for several seconds, fingers spread wide, motionless, as if testing the air. Then it withdrew silently, leaving no ripple behind. By dawn, fog covered everything again. The house stood quiet, the lake calm. But the road that once led to it seemed gone. In its place was only forest, thick, unmoving, endless. And yet, if one stood far away at the valley's edge, they could still see it, the faint, distant glow of that upper window. A heartbeat of blue light pulsing through the mist, calling softly to anyone who dared to follow it. Days passed, and the fog thickened again, swallowing the valley. The lake seemed larger now, its edges bleeding into the forest like a spreading stain. Birds no longer nested nearby. Even insects avoided the air above it. The silence became so complete that it felt alive, a presence that watched, waited, and listened. The townsfolk grew uneasy. Someone mentioned the light had started appearing during the day too, faint but visible even under sunlight. It shimmered like a reflection that refused to fade. Hunters who ventured too close to the water returned pale, speaking of ripples that moved against the wind and reflections that blinked back at them. Soon, the road vanished from maps altogether. Satellite images showed only forest, but the old road signs still pointed toward the lake. Those who followed them found themselves lost, walking in circles, hearing the sound of water where no lake should have been. Then, one evening, the fog lifted once more. The air was unnaturally still, heavy like breath before a scream. The house stood clearer than ever, every board glistening with moisture. The upstairs window burned bright blue, steady and unblinking. Inside, shadows shifted, faint outlines of movement pacing back and forth. The reflection on the lake mirrored it perfectly, though in reverse. When the figure inside stopped, the figure in the reflection continued to move. As night fell, the blue glow spread through the water like ink in glass. The lake began to pulse, its surface trembling though no wind touched it. The dock shuddered, the boards bending slightly as if under invisible weight. Then came the sound, a deep hum, low and resonant, vibrating through the air. The light in the window flared brighter, so bright it lit the trees on the far side of the shore. The hum grew into a trembling tone, and the reflection of the lake no longer matched the world above it. The inverted image rippled faster and faster until the shapes blurred, bending and twisting out of sync. The first drop of water fell upward. Tiny beads of the lake began lifting into the air, floating toward the house, drawn into the window's blue light. Then the entire surface began to rise, pulling upward in thin streams that spiraled into the sky. The house seemed to breathe. Its walls flexed faintly, as though filled with something living. Beneath the foundation, the earth cracked open, revealing black water pulsing with faint illumination, a second lake beneath the first. From that darkness, a shape began to rise. Slow. Enormous. Patient. The water rolled away from it like oil. What emerged had no clear form, shifting angles, glistening surfaces that caught light in impossible ways. It reflected the trees, the moon, and the house all at once, bending them into strange mirrored fragments. When it moved, the forest leaned toward it, drawn by invisible force. The hum grew louder, almost melodic, as if the lake itself were singing. The blue light in the window blinked, and the sound stopped. The shape froze halfway out of the water, trembling faintly, before retreating back into the depths. The ripples it left behind glowed faintly, a pattern of circles spreading outward, wider and wider, until they reached the farthest edge of the lake. The light in the window dimmed, then flickered out. Silence returned. But the road came back. By morning, the fog had lifted completely, and the path to the lake looked almost normal again. The trees stood still. The air was crisp and calm. For the first time in years, sunlight touched the water, and the house appeared harmless, just an old structure decaying by the shore. But those who walked close enough to the lake's edge noticed something strange. The reflection in the water no longer showed the same house. It was newer. Whole. Lights glowing in every window. Smoke rising faintly from the chimney. When a rock was thrown into the water, the reflection didn't ripple. It only blinked, once, as if alive. By nightfall, the blue light returned, faint and pulsing like a heartbeat. The reflection brightened with it, showing the inverted version of the house more vividly than ever before. And then, deep beneath the surface, faint shapes began to move again, like shadows walking across the floor of a mirror. They were not distorted anymore. They were clear. Precise. Waiting. Some nights, when the wind dies completely and the lake looks like glass, the reflection of the house still glows, though the one on land is dark. The window flickers softly, the dock creaks under unseen steps, and a soft ripple touches the shore without cause. And if one stands there long enough, staring into the reflection, they might see themselves in it, standing at the window of the other house, looking back up through the surface, trapped forever in the world beneath the lake.